The update of the documentary is that right now, ideally, if I were to get a little bit more funding, this will become a full-fledged documentary. Right now, what I'm starting to work on are separate standalone pieces. And there are a couple of reasons why I'm doing it that way, because you may by now, maybe if you know anything about what I've been trying to achieve, is that the videos or docs that I work on, I'm not doing it for entertainment reasons. I'm really hoping that they're going to be used for educational purposes. So these standalone pieces, I'm hoping that at different venues with different organizations can be used for different subjects to fulfill different needs. The second reason is something that I think all of you at this point know. There's an expression in Turkish-Armenian relations that is elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is an important expression. However, I think what I'd like to do today, and with these videos, and maybe if I continue doing the profiles of different people, is that I almost would like to dissect this elephant and look at it from different perspectives, depending on what it means for different people. Not at the expense of what the truth is about the Armenian genocide. More in terms of if we were to want to lift the weight of this elephant, and I don't mean lift the subject of the horrendous genocide, I mean lift the weight of this elephant sitting there, I think it may be a little bit helpful if we look at it by like maybe, you know, oh, somebody is talking about the arm of the elephant and the other is talking about this part and the other is talking about this part. And maybe that will make this unbearable elephant silent sitting there a little bit more accessible, and in order to show it more and more and more and more out there and expose it to more people. And that I think would help the world, and I hope you agree. I'm going to tell you one last bit. If you were to catch some terminology, and I'm thinking of just one of them in one of the videos, please don't think of it as an ideological or political statement. If I were to say Turkish-Armenian or American-Armenian, I'm simply describing, not anthropologically, sociologically, I'm not an academic, this is my observation as a journalist. I just mean Armenians who have been born in Turkey and that's where they come from, as opposed to Armenians who were born here and therefore I refer to them as American-Armenian. It's not an ideological statement, I just have to tell you. So, now we're going to play it, and happy screening.
My heart is saturated. I want to know who we are as Armenians if we take away the victimization of the genocide, if we take away the earthquake, if we take away what's going now, the troubles in Artsakh, you know, the war that's going on in Artsakh. What makes us Armenian? Is it our families? Is it our love of education? Is it our ingenuity and hard work? Is it our food, our music? What is it that's what I'm interested in learning? What it is, what's our identity?
We gather today as a proud community, one that is looking back at our history and forward toward our future.
We commemorate the genocide every year, and we call for justice, But as a community, we haven't grappled with, okay, what is it? For instance, the idea of justice and the idea of reparations, we as a community have not talked about it. We don't have one voice. It's not a unified voice, and I wish as a community we would have conversations, we would discuss, but it's such, everyone has their own perspective, and it's, I don't know how to find consensus because it's such a horrible, painful subject. I have family on all continents of this world because of the genocide, and they're first cousins. I have first cousins around the world because of the genocide. I'm not talking generations apart. Project SAVE is it's an archive of photographs, so it's very visual. Many of the photographs of the early 1900s, they're very formal, staged family portraits. It's interesting to me to look at their faces and to think, wow, I know people like that. That could be, to recognize faces in my friends and community members today, and to think it doesn't matter where we live or what time, because we are related. My grandfather was Reverend Manasseh Shnorhokian. My grandmother was Alice Khachadurian Shnorhokian. My grandfather has passed away about 10 years ago, and my grandmother about 5 years ago. And to see their handwriting, see their notes, it was really powerful to me to see that again. And to know that they didn't want to tell us. I don't know if it was act of protection or I don't know why they didn't tell us. Maybe we were too young and didn't ask the right questions, but the idea that it's captured and safe and collected here at Project SAVE was something pretty special. So this was important to me to kind of meet people and overcome my own prejudices and overcome my own, I don't want to say hatred, but a little bit of, anger and hatred by actually meeting people and saying, Turkish people are real, and that sounds odd, but like that this isn't a faraway evil empire. They're my neighbors still. It was challenging. There would be times when someone would mention the hardships of being a Turk in Boston or in the US, and I really bit my tongue really hard when I was told, there's bullying or uneasiness because of their Turkish identity, and I would scream in my head. I would scream, but we were murdered. You're bullied, but you're fine, right? Your family is fine. Your family is whole. You're okay. Etchmiadzin decided to give sainthood to all the martyrs. So we no longer pray for their souls because they're all sainted. And this idea of, okay, those that died have found peace. They're saints now. And so we don't need to pray for their souls, what we can use those prayers elsewhere, almost.
The Armenian genocide is not history. It is an ongoing story like The Promise. It is an unfinished film in which we are all characters. The question is, what role will we play? What role will you play? It is time for a new chapter in this story.
In April, my cousins had scheduled a baptism for their baby daughter. And at first I was like, really? In April? We're so busy. You're making me go to this baptism in New Jersey? Like, I was so out of my mind angry. And then we went, and it was in a church. And here's an Armenian family baptizing a baby in an Armenian church 100 years later. And I was so blown away by that. And I apologized to my family, and they said, we didn't even think of it. But that idea of we did survive. We are having children and educating our children and building businesses and contributing to our society around the world was very powerful.
We'll talk about our upcoming topic.
I'm someone who is very transparent about the links between what we study and who we are.
Oh, because there's a bonus.
And how our life questions, personal questions, affect the work that we do. One is annihilation, one is human reproduction. Human reproduction is gendered. Because we are subject and subjective beings.
In Turkey, right?
When were we last in Turkey?
2 years ago at least.
2 years ago. We haven't been there long.
So I did give birth to my daughters during the process that I was studying, both genocide and the feminist movement and the post-genocide Istanbul community. I thought I was going to write the history of Armenian women's movement, except it occurred to me when I started reading the primary sources itself that 1919, the year this journal begins, is inevitably post-genocide. I would ask my father this question, like, why did they stay? So my father's answer would be, because it's their home. I spent 10 years of thinking about this, and he just explains in like 3 words. So I grew up in Istanbul in the 80s, up until mid-90s. And the assumption when we met a Turkish person, randomly, wherever it might be, is that that person would like us as Lerna, or as my father, as my mother, as persons, but they would have some sort of anti-Armenian feelings as our group, against our group, right? So it's not the feeling that these people don't know much about you and they have negative stereotypes about the group that you belong to is very familiar to me. I mean, that's what minorities are accustomed to in most cultures, right? And that sounds like a dilemma or paradox, but it is so naturalized. It was normal. Because I'm one of them. I mean, I really can pass as Turkish fully. We don't have visible differences. I don't have an accent in Turkish. I am literate in so many senses of the word, in the Turkish culture, Turkish music, everything I enjoy. I'm very relatable. I could have been a Turk as well. I learned this thing called feminism because I was in a dance club also. I started continued folk dances at the college level, so we started dancing Kurdish, Balkan, Laz and Armenian dances and Turkish dances, folk dances. And the group that I was engaged in also had a feminist parallel group. So with this Turkish college circles, we started learning about the history of the Ottoman and Turkish women's movement. And at one point it dawned on me that all these works that are about the history of the Ottoman women's movement, they were talking only about Muslim Turkish women historical actors, despite the fact that Armenians, Greeks, Jews were also Ottoman. And that led me to thinking that maybe they too had some kind of a women's movement at one point. I did not mean to study the genocide or the broader community, actually. I only wanted to see how these women formulated their demands, if they were successful or not, these feminists in the past, what were the obstacles that they faced. But I was shocked, naively shocked, to see that for the first few years of this journal's publication, similar to all other publications in Armenian of that time, they only talk about what had just happened, which is a rather annihilation, like almost complete annihilation of their group. They are the survivors. So I ended up writing a history of Armenians who remained in Turkey in the immediate post-genocide era. The question became this: what does it feel to live amongst a perpetrating majority who continues to not to want you?
The murder of Hrant Dink, one of Turkey's best-known journalists who spoke out against the mass killing of Armenians a century ago, has been condemned in Turkey itself and around the world.
One of the reasons why my questions evolved the way they did was because in 2007, Hrant Dink was assassinated. The Turkish neighbors, for instance, the fact that some of our Turkish neighbors were in the funeral right by the church during the Hrant Dink's funeral, confirmed or assured me that some people were still capable of humanity or compassion. They did take it as their personal pain also, but at the same time, some of our neighbors turned out to be very Turkish nationalists, in the sense that it changes me into thinking that this person that I thought was so close to me can one day turn against me. Because that person can, I know, if the right conditions are met. And I did study genocide. I am a scholar of genocide studies. Now I know this, that if the right conditions are met, neighbors hurt neighbors.
Badarak gertain.
Yeah. Both me and my husband, we decided that we are never going back again. Which is very interesting. I think it is very sad also. Probably understandable, but it's like you lose part of you. Even though most likely we weren't going to return to Turkey anyways. With this idea that if we want to, we can, that was gone. It was taken. So.
Oh, that was so scary. That's me.
Now I'm writing a book on, together with my colleague Melissa Bilal, I am editing an anthology on the history of Armenian feminism, and we are curating a digital archive And my primary target is my daughters.
Mom,
Yes, are you
do you know where my
interested?
dance shoes are?
Dance shoes.
Can I have some Milanos?
Milano's is over. I can give you another snack.
Because she's always doing something, so like she always tells us to leave and like not distract her because she has to work. So it would be like nice if they didn't work in our house. But like yeah. But they have to stay in our house because my dad comes back at work from at 7:30. So
So on the one hand, I think they're internalizing all these ideas that I'm talking about. And many of the meetings happen in my house with Melissa. So they, without their knowledge, they are hearing about this work. But at the same time, they've cultivated this anti-feminist stance because they think I'm exaggerating everything. They associate it with things that take me away from them. So it's a very difficult balance.
Hani ay sonra abakachigar?
Abakachi hip hop der.
Oh.
because they want us to make sure we remember our language.
If we don't speak it, then it's not gonna be anything.
Yeah, because we live in the diaspora, so
What's diaspora?
it's like when you're Armenian but you don't live in Armenia.
Because I want them to know that they are either I was not alone, I'm not a unique person, and then they can be both American, both girls, and Armenians, as well as feminine. Or even if they don't call themselves that, they have a history.
Ura?
I have a thought about that. I've been in America for 50 years and I've been only 3 times back home. And the last one was 2003. For me, the relations between our history and today is nostalgia, missing homeland that I cannot go.
I'd say it's very similar for me. I've left Istanbul in 1979 and went back in 83 and haven't been back. And to me, the call of the places where my family and my ancestor grew and lived is very, very strong, but there is this still a big gap, if you will, between where I am and where that place is, and that's a constant tug with a lot of barriers.
And for me it means once upon a time we shared same land and we have similar cultures, but then it's gone and we are talking about something else, and it's not very easy to talk about for many Turks. I was born in a very old neighborhood in Antep, and it used to be an Armenian neighborhood. So when I was a very small child, even 4 and 5 years old, I was listening about Armenians because all the houses were Armenian houses. So we were talking about some group and Armenians, but there were no Armenians around. So it was my first contact with this Armenian-Turkish relations. I remember one page in my history book, there was this famous ship with which Atatürk went to Samsun. On that page, it's in front of my my eyes now. There was a paragraph depicting Greeks, and I was so afraid of Greeks that I told myself that, oh God, please don't put any Greek across my road ever in my life. So they're so that creatures, and even in my dreams, the Greeks are so bad people. I was afraid of Greeks. That the thing is similar for Armenians. All you know about our education system, we're imposed some thoughts, and later in university times, I was come across with different groups, different ethnic groups, and at the end I was married an Armenian.
So you already experimented the Turkish-Armenian relationships,
Yeah.
beginning with your marriage.
Yeah.
Good luck.
I'd say for me it's been a process. Growing up, my grandparents were active as survivors of the genocide to give their families' story. So it was always part of my family to hear their journey, whether through Deir Zor or through Syria into Lebanon. And so this idea of this human rights atrocities perpetrated on us as a people was very much something I in my family. And so I grew up to be involved in genocide commemorations, marches and so forth, with the knowledge that the genocide was perpetrated by a different government, not Turkey's current government. And then came the realization that the current government has a policy of denial. And so although not murdering Armenians by not acknowledging it, by not giving us justice through by starting with acknowledging the acts of the previous government, there was this continuation of genocide.
My personal awakening came very, very late, actually. My late 20s, maybe early 30s, when I came to the United States. The reality about Armenians, Armenian genocide and everything. I grew up in Zonguldak, a coastal town in Karadeniz region, and obviously I had no contact whatsoever with any Armenians. But when I went to Istanbul to go to middle school, there was a kid named Eddie. Apparently he was an Armenian, I didn't know. And in our class we had Jews. There were more Jews actually than Armenians. And I remember, the very first thing I remember, which I still remember today very vividly, that some of my friends making a comment about Eddie, comparing him to my Jewish friends, Lori and Rosette, saying that Lori and Rosette are fine, they are Jews, but Eddie is an Armenian. So my Turkish friends were saying this. I didn't make any sense of the depth of this, the terribleness of this, until I came to the United States, finally getting to know a couple of Armenians, hearing about different aspects of Armenian issue and Armenian genocide and whatnot.
Growing up in Turkey as an Armenian, the relationship between Armenians and Turks, to me, had all the power on the Turkish side. As an Armenian in Istanbul, I had nothing. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't, debate, question, etc. I just was yes, and I knew what I knew, which wasn't really a lot because my grandparents didn't really talk much about it other than some terrible thing happened. When I left Turkey and when I came here and found myself in a different environment and honestly started learning more of the history that I didn't know, and I wasn't also in an environment where I was pressured not to talk about it, I saw the power start to shift in that relationship. So I could have a conversation, a more honest conversation with with a Turkish friend here than I could in Istanbul, in Turkey.
So, having grown up in a small village in Anatolia, you don't grow up with biases. But then again, when I came to Istanbul, I was educated in a Turkish school for 2 years, and I got kicked out of there because the other kids, again, I'm talking when I'm 11, 12 years old, I want to play with my friends, and then they used to call me Gavur, where you're not going to come into our game. And then one of them punched me, I punched him back, and then we ended up at the principal's room, and the principal started to slap me instead of slapping both of us. Remember now, I'm only 12 years old, and I don't have the comprehension of the brain to analyze the situation like an adult, say he's my teacher or principal. I took that to the heart, and then I yelled, I swore at the principal, of course, and they kicked me out of the school. Ever since then, I said, as soon as I get a chance, I'm going to leave this country. I'm 12 years old.
What happened to these people was a question. Sometimes come to our minds, and sometimes we talk about it. And our grandmother, my grandfather, actually he was a warrior during the independence war of Antep. So he knows the issue very well, and they didn't talk much about it. They just said they've gone. Later, during school years, of course, we are told about all minorities, Armenians, Greeks, and it was not very positive.
We cannot change the past. We have no time machine to change the past. But we should remember it, feel bad about it, learn a lesson, and not repeat it again. So, I've been here 45 years, but my kids might be different, but I still cannot get rid of my culture that I was born in. I like çiğ köfte, I like the Turkish jokes. What do you want me to do about it? So, if there's some higher powers, they brought me to this world in an Anatolian village. It's not my fault. I'm not going to deny my Turkish ancestry, origin, cultural origin, I mean. So, with all respect to Armenians that are too keen, one-sided bias history of theirs, I disagree with them.
History teaches us most of the things that's going to happen, unfortunately. It repeats itself. Our history in Turkish history has been every 10, 15, 20 years a hardship on the minorities. During World War I, the Ottoman Empire got into war. This is a state that's spending money for weapons, and their budget grew. Their income grew. How that can happen during a war? From the Armenians, from the Greeks. Massacre them. Take every gold coin, whatever they had, and kill them. No witness. This happened to my own family. We are ignoring history. That is our blind spot.
Are you advocating that it can happen in the future?
Yes. It's happening right now. Not in Turkey, somewhere else. Always just look around. We Armenians, we live with fear. We grew up with fear. Why do you think our grandparents didn't talk about it? Mm-hmm. Shush, shush, they can hear you. They can kill you. That's how we grew up. My father didn't tell me what happened. He was talking with my uncle. I was playing marbles on the living room on the carpet. I could hear what they were saying. Then I did read about it. But we are missing the big picture. We're not looking at history. And you're talking about starting from the bottom? Yes, the bottom is history. You go to school, you don't read the right thing, you think you know everything. You don't. I think we have to educate ourselves our children, and the generations to come. But you cannot deal with a country like Turkey where they have all that prejudice because they're brought up like this.
But who's
They're
going to change
reading this
as well?
book.
I understand. You're pointing out the wrongs, but the question remains, is still on the table. Who's going to change it for the future?
It's said that we cannot cultivate our minds beyond our prejudice. It's all in our hands. It depends how we educate ourselves. I brought this in case anybody wants to see it later. The Turkish history book and what it says about what Armenians were, what traders they were. And this is taught today in school.
We also know about land in Aintab and Kayseri. It was never somewhere that I wanted to go, but there's talk about repatriation, about taking back lands, and that was not something in my family or in my heart that I wanted. But recently, several weeks ago there was a presentation about a trip of Armenians that had gone back to Kharpet, and the message was, we have to go back so that Armenians aren't these mythical, unknown, they once lived here and didn't go back. It shows that we do care about our homes in Turkey, about our identity in Anatolia, of that blood, of being Armenian, but also means living in Turkey and being part of Turkey. And so this is new for me. I'm trying to work on, but my obligation to witness, to say I am Armenian, and it matters that I'm from Aintab. It matters that I'm from Kayseri. It matters that is where I'm from.
I say the only formula for the 100-year-old problem is very simple. Bury your dangerous weapons. That means pre-accusations, prejudgments, assumptions. For a little while, forget your religions, nationalities, race, and ethnic backgrounds. Forget your and their histories. Forget all the world parliaments and governments. Put them aside. Simply go, really go to each other's countries, homes, shops, mosques, churches, etc. Sit down and talk. Just talk, like the two lost children of the same mother, Anatolia. Don't hold back. No hold back. Talk, but also listen about anything and everything with open hearts. Talk about your common food, your music, your traditions, memories, stories. Talk about yourself, your family, your children, your parents, your great-grandparents, and all else. See, my friend, how fast you will come to a just resolution once and for all. Is called dialogue. In memory of my friend Karantinki.
A couple of years ago, I organized a panel about, it was the 100th anniversary commemoration of the Armenian genocide in Framingham, and there were more than 100 people attended to that panel. I first had so many Armenians together and had a chance to interact with them, but what I was puzzled with, and maybe we can discuss this together too, that the Armenians that wanted to ask questions to the panelists that we had were all so much into the Turkish politics. They knew everything about the Turkish government, what they were trying to do, and I was so puzzled. A little disappointed too, that so many people on the Armenian side, if I may, were so much into the political aspect of this or the state aspect of it, and they were not necessarily thinking about, I was thinking back then, how to establish this human relationship and how to deepen those human relationships in order to get over the feeling that my earlier middle school friends had in their hearts. I was more interested in the second aspect than the first one, but I was hearing all these political comments coming to the panelists and to the panel in general and trying to change the politics in Turkey from outside. And I was, to be honest, a little disappointed at that time.
I honestly find that very normal. Maybe Khan was surprised because he doesn't know the diaspora Armenians as well as I do. But that is very normal. They're yearning. They still think that they have some sort of a relationship, touch with that ancestral land, even though it's in their thoughts. They're not physically in touch there, but they're yearning.
So they think maybe the Turkish government is their government too, and they want to change the government.
I wish they did that.
Yeah.
Then a few million diaspora would support the democratic forces in Turkey. If I was a democratic-minded Turk who wants a change, complete change in our government, I would love to have no help but the Armenian diaspora on my side.
But the third and fourth generation of Armenians in diaspora, are they care about Turkey?
To a level, yes, they do. To a level.
If you think that, you know, in order to improve the relations between Armenians and Turks, then there is the Armenia and Turkey relationship, which is a different level still. And whether you see it or not, you know, big elephant in the room is the genocide and the recognition and how to deal with it and what responsibility the Turkish government has. And so for that, there's a lot of effort to make sure to get the government to recognize what happened as genocide from the Armenian side. And in order to assess the progress there, you have to know what the situation is in Turkey. You know, when Erdogan first came in and Hrant was speaking more openly about this, and there were workshops about the Armenian genocide, the entire diaspora stood up and took notice. And to see that 20, 30 years later, there is this opening and the conversation taking place in Turkey was very hopeful for the diaspora. And just as, you know, good that was to sort of see things go back after that. And obviously, Hrant's assassination was a big, you know, shock to the system to say, oh, we thought it was more open and you could speak about it and you could have dialogue, but when you do, then you're gunned down.
Personally, I look at Germany. It's a good example for our situation, what we're discussing. What they did, how they solved their historical problems with the genocide they had. Any Jew around the world goes to Germany, they have a job, they have an apartment, they have security right away. They haven't lost their dignity. Armenians, minorities in Turkey, they don't live with dignity. They're not proud as a human being.
But it's also changing. Maybe small pace, but it's changing.
I hope so.
There is again a power imbalance there. Talking people to people, from Armenians to Turks, I'm not convinced that on a big global scale that there is much to be done or the ideas or the thinking to be shifted at that level. Hrant did that, and others do, and that still happens. But to me, the impact is small, as opposed to, you know, ultimately, if and when the government of Turkey says, yes, these things happen, and it starts from the top, that the thawing could be a lot faster than on a one-to-one.
But on the other hand, though, what you're wishing, you're right. But the problem with government admitting the wrongs of the history is counterproductive. Every government thinks of their advantages and disadvantages, minuses and pluses. It is big blow to the establishment of Turkish Republic, number one, admitting what happened prior to 1923. Number two is it's like falsifying some of your heroes. Some of those heroes, the people that establish, along with Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, some of them İttihat leaders, they were in the Armenian massacres.
Sure.
So you're taking the historical heroes and then making them villains or murderers when you open up that Pandora's box.
But one thing I'm struggling with myself, so I'm a parent to two daughters, 6 and 10-year-olds. And the next thing I think in my parenthood is to talk with them about the Armenian genocide. Because so far they seem to enjoy being an American, they were born here, but also being a Turk, having a family and visiting them in Turkey and everywhere. But I really need to find a way to communicate to them that, you know, that's something that happened in the history that they have to face. The reality that being a Turk, and that's a part of the Turkish history. And you know, coming to terms with it is very important. That's my next task, I guess, to deal with that thing as a way of communicating to them and helping them to deal with it. It's not an easy thing.
Can I ask the individuals on the panel to please go and take a seat so we can all start talking? Also, while they're taking their seats, I have to extend a big, big thank you to all of you for just being here, because I know not only is it, you know, April, and we all know we do have a lot of events that sometimes conflict with each other. I know there's a whole other event tonight and maybe more that I don't know of. So thank you very much for being here. It really means a lot to me, and I think it means a lot to everybody that I have actually talked to for during the filming and probably the future filmings. Am I missing? Tula. Tula. Yeah. Sure. Okay. That's okay. All right. So the way I envision this is that without me actually giving kind of an opinion or anything right now myself, and there are a few things that we could pick on that I think are worth discussing. I don't want to do that right now. I'd like to get just in random order, see what you all thought watching this. And I do want to say one thing. I can certainly read exactly the introduction of all my friends and colleagues here if they would like me to. However, if I do that, that's going to take a little while. So would you like me to introduce you, or would you like to say just something about yourself? It's totally up to you, and these are actually available. If there aren't enough of them, the panelists' names and information are on the website of Neighbors in Memory under upcoming events, and now it'll be not upcoming event, but past events, I guess, starting tomorrow. So is there anybody who would like to start? I'm just going to go like that, and then I do have my own notes, but I want you to talk. Would you like to start?
Well, ladies
Whoever
first.
wants to. Ladies first.
I'm the oldest one. Why don't I start? Okay. Hi everybody, my name is Mardik Merdinyan, Mardiros Merdinyan also. Actually, one of the houses in the movies was my family's house, so you saw me there as well. I'm daughter of Zephyr and Zulal and Lerna's husband, Lerna Kılıçoğlu. So a little bit about myself. My family roots, my father's side is from Arapgir, today's Malatya, Turkey. And I was born and raised in Istanbul. My mother's side is from Adana and Istanbul, so I'm an Istanbul Armenian. As I was watching the pieces, especially about how to feel within Turks or within perpetrating, living in the perpetrating country or not. So innately, as Istanbul Armenians, we internalize this. We know where to speak. We know where to shut up. We know where to express our opinions and so on. But there are certain environments where this whole thing matters, and there are certain environments that this whole thing does not matter. I mean, and I'll give you a very good example. I'm a fan of a soccer club in Turkey, Beşiktaş, black and white. And I was in, and I went back to Turkey last November, and I was in a soccer game after like 20 years maybe.
Could we have a microphone?
We need a mic. I can talk louder. So I was in the soccer game, and I was, you know, within like 40,000 Turkish people, right? And the seat next to me was a regular random Turk. And as Beşiktaş scored, nothing mattered. We hugged each other. So as Istanbul Armenians, we look at this a bit differently. I think that's what I would like to start with, and give word to other panelists.
If anybody has trouble hearing, please come and take seats up here, because you will definitely hear what the people are saying. Please, anybody who needs to come, they can come right here. Anybody wants to come to the front, please do. Sorry, it's a small enough space that I do not have a microphone, and that's what it is. But next time, if anybody invites us to an establishment with lots of resources and a communication department, we will have a microphone. Okay. Anyone? Does Apo want to say something, please? Let's give Apo the chance, because he is...
Thank you. I love history. And thank you so much for what you did. This is a great job. And I find history as a teacher more than any other resource. I want to throw a vision about that we never touched. But in my belief, and not only me, most historians believe, is a source of all this.
Speak a little louder, please.
A source of the evil.
Yes.
Unfortunately, is one word. It's called money. We have all these ideas, we have all these titles, we have all these etiquettes. But you go beyond that, you come to one point, and that's called money. That's all I'm going to say.
We can come back. I definitely want the audience to talk, but I'd like to give a chance to people here just at least once. So let's go with the ladies, and then we'll also come to Ihsan, please.
My name is Tülay Kılıçdaroğlu.
You have to speak louder.
My name is Tülay. I was born in Gaziantep, as I said in the movie, and I was raised in Gaziantep. I moved to Istanbul when I have my university education, and until that time in Antep, I heard a lot of things about Armenians, but I never come across an Armenian. I heard a lot of things about them, and actually I was born in a house of an Armenian. It was an Armenian neighborhood. I was listening a lot of things about Armenians, but I never come across to an Armenian. And until I was in the university, then I married to an Armenian, and I entered the community. And I met hundreds of Armenians, different backgrounds, different socioeconomic groups, different ages, women, men, children. And now I'm 42 years old, and I can say that I know Armenians, maybe more than some Armenians themselves. And I can say that I feel what they feel about this issue. I feel the intensity of their feelings, and I can see there is no corresponding feeling on the other side. You can, if you have any kind of empathy, you can feel it. But if you live within the community and you know them, you can feel that better. And this intensity of feeling has no correspondence on the other side. And I think that is the most important issue.
That's very interesting coming from you, knowing, being married to an Armenian. I was involved in Gonca's Turkish-Armenian Women's Alliance. My name is Bilazarian-Purutyan. My husband Herman was one of the dialogue participants. We did come to some impasses with our dialogues where sometimes I think the Armenian women, to be honest, did feel that maybe what you're saying, that are you able to understand? From a human perspective, it's hard to imagine that there isn't some ability to have compassion and understanding for another human's experience. I always think in analogies, and I'm trying to think of this as sort of, the experience of the African Americans, very hard to understand what it is to be an African American, if you're not. Probably very, very hard to understand that. So I think that's how I'm framing it. But with that, what is the responsibility of us as human beings in a community, and where can we start? Because it's very, very frustrating to me, and I'm very grateful to Gonca for starting this, because I think if it weren't for Gonca, we would not be talking about this.
Well, I couldn't do this without all of you.
So it's very hard to frame it. It's very big. It's very deep. And so I'm grateful for people bringing out those difficult facts that we have to, and putting them on the table.
Good evening, everyone. Ihsan is my name. And thank you, Gonca and Curtis, for putting excellent pieces together and making tonight possible. My experience is actually a little similar as Tulay's, being married to an Armenian woman. It helps actually, at least in your immediate family circles. But other than that, also I was born in Adana, which used to be the very important spot for Armenian culture, used to be called Kilikia, and I was specifically the small tiny town I was born in was Kadirli, where you will still find remnants from the Armenians and the remnants of the monastery, and which is actually neighboring to Sis, Kozan, where there used to be the home for the Kilikian Armenian Patriarchy. So the long story short, my professional paths took me to Kars, and Kars is the bordering city with Armenia, where the border has been closed since 1992 over the Azerbaijani occupation, the Armenian occupation of the Azerbaijani territory, claimed to be Azerbaijani territory, Nagorno-Karabakh. So then there I worked with the mayor of Kars. Actually, that was the very first days that my perception of the Armenia, my perception with the other side of the border started emerging, but from more political point of view, because the mayoral rhetoric was to open the borders so that the people can come together, the money bring, the wealthy, and we can be friends with the help of the economic vibration, this and that. But it was not really very much so, though I would definitely say that seeing your video, which is capturing actually not only the geographically diverse as per the ancestral land of the people you talk, but also the intensity of the hate, not the hate maybe, but the anger, differs from what you can find in the region, in the immediate border area, so to say. I mean, you would go to Armenia, I've been there like 20, 30 times maybe, but it's not really a big issue there, but I think that has a lot to do with the level of the education of the people there, and they are being very much stuck with their daily concerns, such as the economic challenges that they have to overcome. So when it comes to, the summing up the Armenian cause as an issue and coming up with some so-called demands from Turkish government, I think diaspora again has been the pioneering role to define the thing and to make a threat for the Turkish government eventually. So I think in this regard, what you are doing is maybe a little bit impact, as you were telling you, but we don't have anything left actually, rather than trying to keep our hope, because things must go on.
Actually, when my father and I traveled to his birthplace, Arapgir, after like 50 years later, since he left the place, I experienced the same feelings, right? I'm traveling there, I know Istanbul and pretty much nothing else about the rest of the Turkey. So we went there, and I felt like the local people in Arapgir were so open, and they weren't afraid of talking about their past and their grandparents being Armenian, and they were like pointing at people who were converts, as they were kind of walking by. And in Istanbul, it's totally different. It's like more hostile in certain areas, right? But in Arapgir, it was just everybody was very open. In fact, we were kind of walking around to find my father's home in Arapgir, and one of the Kurdish, or I think she was Kurdish, one of the Kurdish women, because we're kind of walking around daytime and the women were at home, and he yelled to other women, said that, look at these Armenians, look at these people, they came back to their homeland to find their houses. I'm like, homeland? It had never occurred to me that somebody would kind of call us as people coming back to their homeland in Arapgir. So I think just to kind of add to your point about in rural Anatolia, small towns where Armenians used to be inhabitants, there are still there's still a lot of traces of Armenians, and people are not afraid to speak.
I'd love the audience to contribute and participate. Nadim, did you want to? Professor Shadi is from the Fletcher School's Fares Center for Eastern Studies. Did you have a question? Looked like you were going to say something.
No, I was thinking of future.
Oh no, before that, it looked like you were about to say something.
No, sorry.
10 minutes ago.
10 minutes ago, I was just thinking about what the son said, and about what's the difference between
Can you please speak louder?
Between the difference between how the diaspora sees things and how people in the region see it, and also thinking, which was not said, which is just difference between generations in the diaspora. Older people, how long does the memory last, and how does the new generation deal with it? What do you tell your grandchildren?
That is a difficult one. I have 4 grandchildren.
It's her fault. She said ask a question.
I have 4 grandchildren.
I like it.
And with all my involvements, 4 grandchildren, and with all my involvements in the history of my ancestors, I cannot talk to them about it. I cannot say anything at this point.
Why?
Why? Their father and their mother doesn't want. They think they're very young. They're not young. One is 12, the other one is 10, the youngest is 6. I try to explain to them when they are complaining, going to Burger King, and it's the same food again. And I try to say, your great-grandfather starved. He didn't have even a piece of bread. So it is a difficult issue to relay that to the new generation. I don't want to pass the borders of my children's desires, so I go along with that. But it's difficult. It's difficult to deal with.
So it's protection rather than rejection. It's not them rejecting.
No.
Trying to keep them away from the trauma.
Yes.
The many Istanbul Armenians, so correct me if I'm wrong, even hesitate to call it genocide, but they prefer to call it Metzi again, like a big pain. Big pain means felaket. Big catastrophe.
Please, Judy.
What you just said reminds me of why I very much like that play, Women Are Alright, partly because it brings together a young Turkish man and a young Armenian woman, and it's a love story. But also, towards the end, the young woman describes to the older women in her family why it is so painful and harmful to keep secrets, as they tried to. I mean, that they were explaining that it was her mother who died of breast cancer who made the promise not to. But she was very articulate in why that is not a good strategy and why it's ultimately quite harmful. And it taught me a lot about how one might talk about these kinds of issues. Now, I understand when kids are 2 and 3 and 4 years old, you want to try to keep them from violent imagery. But as kids get older and they're more capable of understanding that there is violence in the world and that human beings are capable of unspeakable things, that you engage in conversation about it so that they're prepared for what they're going to be seeing out there. And I think that the other reason I like this play is that it involved this young Turkish man speaking to the older Armenian women about, you know, I'm not the one you should hate, and I can be part of speaking truth to power going forward. I can be part of telling the truth. And there was just a lot of modeling in this play for how people could behave differently in their relationships to one another. When I was in meetings in Morocco, all over the world, in women's health meetings with people from the World Health Organization, I would meet Turkish physicians who were in, this was nothing to do with the genocide or Turkish-Armenian relations, but we would get upon the topic of the Armenian genocide eventually, because it's always in the back of my mind. And not a single one of them denied it. They all knew the truth, but they all said we can't speak about it or we get in trouble. So I found that interesting that even back in the 80s and 90s, there were a fair number, yep, they grew up with those texts, but they were aware of the truth. And now with the internet and now with, I mean, I think what you said is true. I think things are changing. I meet a lot of young Turkish women who come to Boston College. They live in our neighborhood. And my conversations with these younger women are very different. And, you know, they're saying things like, oh, it's just going to be a matter of time before this government has to recognize. But all of us have to be careful because they know it's a totalitarian state. And so they're careful. But the importance of understanding this and then realizing that you can speak and live and be friends with Armenians and vice versa, even while this political debate is going to rage, and it will for some time, because these relationships are still important as human beings.
The only problem with that is the numbers. We're talking about a society that is brainwashed.
That's right.
So how can you reverse that? And a child comes out of high school and says, oh, Armenians are bad. They're #1 enemy of our ancestors. And they are today. Just imagine an Armenian child that goes to school and has to write an essay about how Armenians are so bad.
Right.
I mean,
But go ahead.
No, I want you to say it, but I'm just going to interject an age-old dilemma, at least that from my years at Fletcher. And there's a center there, I don't know if they're active, but there's always has been, at least for the past, I don't know, 20-some years, about finding peace versus finding justice versus conflict resolution. And I think that's kind of where we are. This is how I look at it. Because I mean, you can all speak, but I just want to interject that. I think the justice part, which I guess it's obvious to most of us, or maybe to me, and maybe that's why I got in trouble sometimes, is that the justice part may be personally important to me. And then there is the whole peace and conflict resolution part, that is a different thing. And I think when I listened to Ihsan about his experiences, and then Mardik also talks about that, the way I look at it, and you can tell me if I'm on the right track, that maybe there is a reason why the Anatolian people on these border towns are actually at peace more and are not really talking too much about genocide. So I don't know what the answer to that is. So I just wanted to have that subject out there. I think looking for peace at all costs and conflict resolution versus finding justice and telling the truth. So if anybody who wants to say something, that's what I'm observing from listening to this conversation. And maybe we do have to make a choice. Do we?
I don't know. I mean, I go back and forth in that. Sometimes I say, you know what, they recognize or not, who cares, right? I know what happened. Most of the world knows what happened. The Turkish government recognizes, so what? But sometimes but there is a unsolved or unpunished crime, and how can I reconcile that, right? I mean, there has to be a consequence, yet there hasn't been it. So, yeah, I have that dilemma all the time.
Please.
I think this conflict resolution and peace part of it related to governments and states. They have to be involved in it to come up with a peaceful resolution. But for the justice part, it can be interpersonal also. You can feel that justice, as I said before, what I feel from Armenians are their very intense feeling about this issue, and it becomes more intense as they don't see any correspondence on the other part. So if they see any kind of empathy, any kind of being sorry about what have been done, they may feel a kind of justice, and this may be an interpersonal thing, so you don't need an intervention of states or governmental bodies, but in interpersonal relations you can come with a feeling of justice at least. I don't know. You agree or not? Go ahead.
I just want to make a comment about, the justice, whether a crime is punished or not, or can you live with it, there's that. Then there's also the consequences of something that's not being addressed and continuation of a certain type of behavior that I think goes when things aren't addressed. So two things I just thought of. One, there was a recent article in Turkish, somebody wrote, he was an Armenian, but he was a good man. This is today, this year. So if you don't deal with it, this just goes on and on and on.
Right.
There was something else, it was said, I think it was in the elections. It's a big, sign. So if you don't address these things, this is 2017, 2016, this is still happening.
Or presidents say, affedersiniz Ermeni.
So, affedersiniz Ermeni.
We have several very disgraceful and embarrassing episodes. Nadine, please, you want to say something?
It's just that what you're talking about has it's a different debate in Lebanon probably because it was less, we've been through very, very bad times, but we're still both there, right? The Muslims and Christians and and others. And the tradition in Lebanon since the 19th century, since there were the massacres of the 1860s in Damascus and in North Lebanon, was to forget, to say, to sign a declaration to forget, to say what is past, and to look for a future formula. So how can we, how to avoid this repeating itself. So the system that was created in late Ottoman Lebanon was one that was suggested by the Maronite Church, who were the victims, and they refused justice. They refused to cooperate with a tribunal that was set up by the Ottomans. The Ottomans were very keen on punishing the Druze. They set up, they did that in Damascus. They say in Damascus that when Fuad Pasha went to Damascus, he stopped hanging only when they ran out of rope. He was hanging the people who killed the Christians because the Ottoman state wanted to show that it was dealing with this, it was afraid of external intervention. In Lebanon it was very different, and but that's because we're all still there, and there is a potential for coexistence. In Turkey, it's very different.
Well, thank you. That's so you're basically saying that they, if you want to call them victims, they did say they didn't care at that point about the justice part.
Well,
they cared to a point, but they wanted to forget.
About getting protection for the future more than revenge. So a system which would allow them protection and to live with the others rather than a revenge. In Damascus there was revenge, but the result was that most of the Christians of Damascus left. They did get their revenge, they did get their compensation, but they moved to Beirut from the Christians of Damascus moved to Beirut as a result.
Well, I'm wondering if, as an Armenian diaspora, if we, the more I get to know Turkish friends, very excellent human beings, that seems like maybe a very healthy position to focus on the future, the healing, the being excellent in the future, being fearless, being strong, and not pouring energy into revenge or, bottom line, it comes to a choice. There is a choice. We only have so much energy and resources. We do have to choose. And so right now, I think we're choosing the problem over the solution.
But it's a different context.
But I think we can start talking about that if there's empathy, going back to Tulay's point, empathy and acknowledgement and recognition. If you keep organizing conferences with a title like Big Armenian Lies, sorry, I cannot talk to you. You boil my rage. And at that point, you don't have me, you haven't won me. If you at least recognize and acknowledge and feel empathy towards me as a group, then we have something to talk about.
I had a question for the professor.
Yes.
How did they, just curious, I don't know the history about
the Lebanese Maronite Christians. I just heard about it, but did that help their community going forward? How did they fare? I mean, not fear, but like, did that attitude help the community? Did they grow? Did they thrive?
Yes,
did it help them?
I mean, they're still there.
I don't know, like how
well,
many of them are there? Are they
So what
free? Are
happened-
they better off?
What happened was that the Europeans who came, they sent envoys, and the Turks set up a list of 6,000 people to be punished. Then the list was diminished to 2,800, then to 900, and they ended up with 54. And then to be punished, and then they ended up with 4 to be hanged and 50 to be exiled, and then nobody was hanged and some were exiled. That was because the Maronite Church refused to collaborate with that. What they wanted was a system that gave them more power to be protected. So what was created was a special arrangement in Mount Lebanon where you had a council, and the council had representatives from every religion, from every sect in the country, and the head of the Mutasarrif, which is the head of the governor, was a Christian Ottoman. So we had many Armenian, governors in Lebanon because it was a Christian Ottoman. So we had Armenians, and we had Albanians and others. And this system remains till now, in the sense that a variation of it remains, that you still have power sharing in the system. We still have, our president is a Maronite.
What year was the massacre?
So there was the massacre was 1860, and it happened in Damascus and in the Mount Lebanon in the same year.
Okay.
But it was treated in totally different ways.
Thank you.
Since the context, as the professor said, is different, I think I'd like to move on
Well,
to
no, I'm
another
just,
thing.
because it seems like, the idea of power sharing and, right now it seems like those are not options.
No.
So I guess what I'm thinking, I'd like to just pose to everybody this dilemma. But Lerna and Melissa spoke to our Sunday school. I'm Sunday school superintendent at St. James. And they talked about the Armenian women heroes, and it brought up all kinds of ooh, ah, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then some of the parents there were saying, you know what, in Belmont or Arlington or wherever their kids were going to school, they did an Armenian report, a genocide report, and they were getting some flack either from teachers who are not prioritizing it, or even some other kids were saying that they were bullying them, or that this was, there were, I can't remember the context.
Yeah, one case where the Armenian-American child student did a report on the Armenian genocide, I think middle school, maybe early high school, and then there was a Turkish-American, I assume, student in the same class who got upset and felt insulted and complained to the principal that he was being bullied because of this.
That he had to listen to it, or that
that he had to listen to it.
So I'm just sort of, that's the here and now. That's, greater Boston.
Can I just say something about that? Because I've heard incidents like this in many places. What helped a great deal was a parent who had good information, who went to went to various people who were authoritative, scholars, brought something in non-confrontational language back to the teacher and the principal, and said, obviously this is a delicate subject, but many aspects of history are very delicate, like the genocide of Native Americans in this country, which is one of the biggest genocides ever perpetrated. We have to deal with our history, even though it's painful for someone to be associated as progeny with someone who perpetrated that. And you see it all over the world where there have been genocides committed. It's hard to be the offspring of people who committed such genocides, but you have to own the history. And it's really important that nobody get away with calling that bullying, because that language is now being used all over the place in a way that is really destructive. So I don't know whether we need a help network where people who've done this and done it well can help people who confront examples like this, but we've got to help each other respond very quickly and because a lot of teachers don't know anything about this issue. So okay, someone feels bullied, they take that at face value, and it's going to be very important we intervene in a very respectful and sensitive way, but that we do intervene.
Never again became and again and again and again. It's going on right now.
And if that child is feeling bullied, it says something about the parents of the child. Most probably the child went home and talked about report to his or her parents, and the parents give the child that feeling of bullying or bullying.
What is the best outcome?
Because the parents may say that it's not your fault. It's an issue of past. It was taken place in past. It's not related to you as a person. You should not take it personally. You have to understand your friend's feeling. So parents.
It's always parents. Yes. Anyone want to? Oh yes, please. Yes.
So my good lady Gonca, thanks for arranging this. If I forget, remember I'm always sorry. But I like to suggest that if we there's like hundreds of examples, like these folks are telling about in the case, these and that, all over Europe, all over everywhere, America. But in the greater picture of Armenian-Turkish reconciliation, if you want to use the word, in a nutshell, it boils down to best example is Germany. Actually, the first trials of the perpetrators were done in Istanbul in 1919, is documented. And the heads of the İttihat Terakki, all the big heads, Anjos, were sentenced to death in absentia. So, I like to bring, because everybody saw around that, I call it resentment, that disastrous picture of this body. The guy said in a nutshell, it's one sentence. Why do I care what German or European or American parliaments are saying about it? I know what happened to my ancestors, and if my good Turkish and Kurdish friends don't know, some do know, and the others, it's my job to explain to them what happened. Now, he said, the Turks and Armenians, both sick nations, they're paranoid and hysteric, and you know what? Everybody knew in 1915 what's happening. German generals were in command in German militaries, whatever it is, had Ottoman military people were German. So let's stop this game. Germany after 100 years, what am I going to do? I was going to say bravo Germany, no man. In 45 years I have never ever participated in the Armenian genocide commemorations in America. And I'm 100% Armenian. There is a reason for it. Ask me. This is the guy who was told Gabur and slapped by the principal, and ever since 12 years old I put in my mind I'm going to leave Turkey. But I do not hate Turkey. I love Turkey. It's my motherland. Now, but I do not hate Turkish people. But I hate the resentful, stupid, stubbornly stupid Turkish history, wrongful history that was being brainwashed to all these last 3-4 generations. So, whose problem is it? Believe it or not, Armenians are sick. The only cure is going to come not from Mr. Bush or Mr. Trump to recognize the Armenian genocide. The only participation I will go to commemorate my ancestors if the Ankara government says, we are sponsoring it, we are commemorating the Armenian genocide, then I will beg for the airplane money and I will go over there to Ankara to remember their memory. The rest is all, every time we come together, we know how bad things are. Everybody says what happened. Yeah, we all know, yes, fine, let's stop it. Okay, we also all know that even today, like Apo pointed out, he's right. Even today, there's a crime being committed to Turkish youth. Their brain is being poisoned. Somebody's got to stop it. Democratic-minded Turks and Armenians have to come together. They are each other's doctors. That's what my late friend Grant said that, and there is no other prescription. Dialogue is the only prescription. Whether it's with 10 people, it becomes 1,000, then it becomes 1,000,000. The only people who will change the Turkish government's attitude and make it recognize, Germany did not, until the Green Party and their Congress people, multitude of the German Congress people, forced the German government, and they have no choice but to recognize it. The Turkish people will force their government to recognize it. There is no other way. The rest is fault.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think, so the way Zadik very emotionally articulated, I think here's to me is another question that we can discuss. So I think what Zadik is basically saying, let's stop hoping that Obama or Clinton or whomever is going to recognize genocide and then further have an impact upon the Turkish government and force it. Let's not, I think what I'm hearing is that is useless. Let's go to the people. Let's try to get the people, because it's the people that are going to enforce anything. So to me, the question is, how much of the outside, encouragement or outside, you can call it interference or outside push, should this subject get from those outside of Turkey? I wonder about this question. Do you wonder about that question?
So what's the meaning of talking here then?
Well, I agree essentially with what my Zadik Akbari said. I agree essentially. But
there's always,
I think we have to understand the standpoint of the diaspora and their efforts to get it recognized by country and country and country and state by state by state by state. I think there's a subtle thing there that has to be respected. That's the kind of following through, right? Not like I'm looking at this asymmetric battle between this whole Turkish state, millions of dollars to lobbyists, yet there's this, especially from the 1930s, 40s, like group of Armenian businessmen and little, people, intelligentsia kind of coming together and wage a battle against this Turkish government. I think there is something to respect there. I think one is a very long road. The right road is the long road, yet something needs to kind of intervene to catalyze that long road. And I think if there wasn't a diaspora, we wouldn't have, I don't think we would have the brave scholars, Turkish scholars that now throwing punches to this wall of silence, or people like Gonca doing this. So I think there's a place for that too. That's all I'm going to say.
Then I think it's turned into a kind of vicious circle, so to say. Because I personally agree with what Zadik Akbari put on the table. However, it is getting less and less possible nowadays, particularly in Turkey, because there is not enough tool for people to really feel this moral obligation or to try to help the Armenians to get coming together or to heal the common pains. Because all the instrumentals of the news gathering is kept, and the government ruled media is, I think it's going to be really tougher than it used to be for the people who feel more responsible to do something, to push forward the government, to acknowledge it.
But who's going to make them acknowledge? That's what I was asking. Who's going to force them to acknowledge?
Money.
Yeah.
But
Money.
no.
Money.
But Armenian diaspora or Armenian government, little government, does not have the economic or military power to force Turkey to do or say either you do this or the consequences. The only other second option is there is a bigger force than money. The Renaissance or the revolution, cultural and social revolution, right inside the Turkey, right for money. So cultural and social revolution. Yes, I understand. But I don't know. That's Turkish population problem.
But again, could we have imagined April 24th commemoration right at the center of Istanbul 20 years ago?
So bravo, there you go. It's getting little by little.
But this is also happening with diaspora kind of pushing.
Yes, diaspora should keep pushing.
Right.
That's what I was trying to advocate. Because no Armenian in this world will ever want their so-called, that you see that yearning, that connection. I'm from Arap. You're not from Arap.
But
If you ask my daughter, she says I'm from Kayseri. She's born in Boston. That yearning, if Armenian diaspora says, I don't care, it's not my problem. You know what's going to happen? If Turkey becomes even worse than Afghanistan, they have no more connections to that fatherland or motherland, whatever.
So I just want to, in my understanding.
Not because I want to have the Turkish government.
So we're talking about two different things. You don't believe that there should be a lot of pressure upon the U.S. government to recognize genocide. You don't think diaspora should be working towards that.
U.S.
You think
government
that
recognized it. Recognized it so many times, you guys forgot it.
No, they did not officially. It's not official, we all know it. And a lot of diasporan Armenians want it recognized, correct?
Right.
Correct.
Yes.
So what I'm telling you is that I guess you're talking about two different things. You would ideally, I'm just trying to paraphrase what you're saying. You don't think that we should put, or for diasporan Armenians should not put their effort into getting the United States government or any other government to recognize, wait, but you think that they should put their energy into helping the Turkish people themselves within Turkey to put pressure upon their government. Is that what you're saying? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, but if they have extra power, extra energy, extra money, they want to force the American government, good luck to them. God bless. The more the better, the better.
Okay, please.
Okay, I'm going to shift the conversation, but not too far. And I think I'm going to open a can of worms that we might regret later, but it is connected to your story, Gonca, which in this presentation you did not share, but we know that you did share it on YouTube at one point, the short self-analysis documentary that you did, in which you have featured the assassination of Orhan Gündüz here. So I'm just curious about what people think about Asala's role in making us come here, because I think 20 years ago this idea of, it wasn't 20, it was early 80s, and when Margaret made that comment about you not being here, I wonder if you would be here in this position if Asala did not happen, or if Hrant things did not happen. Like maybe the role of both us, like the continued violence or assassinations in one way or another. Like how do we both Turks and Armenians grapple with that? I myself am very conflicted about it. I could not find, for instance, for Operation Nemesis. This is more about like Tülay's point about how that Turkish-American student would feel in the classroom, not having done it, right? So when I think about the Operation Nemesis, this immediate post-genocide vengeance operation to assassinate the very architects of the genocide, I agree with them. I mean, justice had to be delivered. They were, in any case, even retrospectively, we know that most of them really either thought about or ordered what amounted to the extermination of Armenians. But for the next generation, it's more difficult, right? Like the diplomats, the Turkish diplomats and others who did not have direction, but they represent and they contribute and they benefit. So where do we really, also we can have the German example, contemporary German example in mind, like the fact that this Turkish student in America at that moment should be absolved of the guilt by being told that it wasn't your fault, yes, but at the same time, it is his group's fault. Like where, or like me as an Armenian, like where does my grouphood, what does it entail that I'm in the same group that organized Asala killing, for instance?
Well, that does open a can of worms. Maybe we need to do this again because it's 8:53. We have 15 minutes more. I'm going to go over what I had said at 9. Anybody want to comment?
I would love to contribute to Verna's point. That is, I think the reason, so for me, like the Armenian issue is like not like a one-time thing happened in the past. It's still going on actually. It raised up with the Asala. It gave enough political discourse to Turkish government to blame the entire Armenians as a whole group living out of the Armenia or Turkey as diaspora. So that's the misunderstanding of the perceptions and the definition. So it is even the hearing the diaspora as a term would actually feel not good to an average Turk walking in the street. I think the third round of this issue was the Nagorno-Karabakh issue, that the Turkish government, to them, for the sake of punishing the Armenia, closed the border and favoring the Azerbaijan. So you can really not know what will be the fourth round. So then all these, the political conflict and how to say, the conflict of interest makes the issue even more complicated. I mean, had it was been only 1915 genocide issue, I'm sure that maybe we would have been in a relatively better situation now. Had there not been the Azerbaijani,
But that's related.
Yeah, it's related. But the Azerbaijan, keeping a huge amount of the source of the capital. So it's a big instrument on Turkish government to pressure to stay away from the issue.
So are we coming back to the money issue?
Well, not directly, but indirectly, yes.
The ironic part, Istanbul and some other parts of Turkey is full of native Armenian workers. They depend on that income because their income is so low in Armenia. They live, they work in Istanbul, in households, cleaning, doing all this menial work that a lot of people.
You're talking about the workers that come from mainland Armenia.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Anybody want to say a few final things? Yes.
Well, I really didn't want to say much of anything, but all due respect on all these discussions are very repetitious for us. The thing is, we're dealing with a government who does not respect its own people's human rights. I think we're asking a little too much from this government, who is killing his own people and imprisoning his journalists, his intellectuals. I mean, we can discuss all we want. Money even will not do the job. It's all political. Everybody knows about Armenian genocide. I mean, I don't know. We're expecting a little too much from the Turkish government, who has a dictator who is killing his own people and does not respect the human rights of its own people. How do we expect him to accept Armenian genocide? They know they did it. It just, America knows it was done. It's all political. Let's just pacify ourselves, but
well,
I grew up in Lebanon. I'm a first generation. My father was an orphan. He never talked about the genocide. We learned all this in schools, and Lebanon was the best Armenian community that taught Armenian history and religion much better than it was in Armenia. I mean, everything was done. I don't know how you people feel about it, but it's just very frustrating.
Are we in a hopeless situation?
Yeah, we just hope and keep on doing what we're doing, but
Personally, I believe there's hope. I think every individual makes a difference. Every single one of us can make a difference.
But I also agree
There's
with
one beautiful American saying, says, the squeaking wheel gets the oil.
how long does
So
that
we
wheel
are the
have to
squeaking
swing?
wheel.
Like I agree with Zadig in the sense that our hope is in the new generation, whether it's Turkish new generation, Armenian new generation, American new generation. Look what's happening in the United States now. It's the school kids that are going to, we just hope. It's all hope.
Hope, yes.
Question? Question? No? Comment? Oh, there is somebody who hasn't spoken. Please, Judy. Yes.
I just have a question. So for me, I completely agree with İhsan Bey. Also, I listened to, I think her name was Ganira Pashayeva. She's a politician from Azerbaijani parliament. And
I'm sorry, Begüm, you agree with who, you said? With İhsan.
İhsan Bey's comment. How this issue with Armenia and Azerbaijan, and it's so difficult to move forward without having that settled, because I think to me that dialogue can be much easier if Turkey is not afraid of the consequences that might come from Azerbaijan, because that's a big problem. And so can diaspora actually enforce something on Armenia to actually, like ameliorate the relationship between Azerbaijan and Armenia? Just to think, like, tackle the issue from another angle.
Well, I'm glad
I think if you are looking for one issue where Armenians are pretty much united and concretely united, that's Nagorno-Karabakh. Because a lot of even genocide recognition and stuff, we may have different ideas. When it comes to Karabakh issue, I think we're all united, in my opinion.
Well, I guess maybe then I should ask the question whether should we be putting more emphasis on Turkey-Armenian relations? That's another question that was in my notes. Is that, should we be, is that what we should be doing? I'm just asking.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You mean the state?
Yes.
I think we shouldn't expect anything from the heads. It has to come from the grassroots. I believe in the youth. And they have to be educated.
Change the history books.
Well, of course, I don't mean let's put emphasis on, let's talk to Erdogan about Armenia. I mean, should we be thinking more about the relations between Turkey and Armenia, is what I'm getting at. Is that a part
I think that's all we should stick to, because when it comes to Karabakh, there are bigger players in picture here, Russia and oil in Azerbaijan. So the Armenian diaspora of a few million people is not going to change the outcome of what is going to happen is going to happen. However the Karabakh issue will be resolved, it will be resolved by bigger powers. But the Armenian diaspora, through their common friends and Turkish people in diaspora, visitations, this and that, and cultural events, little by little, they can impact the social change in Turkey, inside Turkey, but not the political powers that are being played in Azerbaijan, Karabakh, and Republic of Armenia. That, Armenian diaspora has no power in that. Maybe Russia is doing it intentionally, keeping it alive so it can supply weapons to both parties. Let's not even get into that picture.
So what should the average non-governmental person of Turkish or Armenian
dialogue between Armenians and Turks only, forget the Azerbaijan. Even though they're great people, they have great music.
Actually, we didn't talk about or define the solution. What's the solution?
Well, that's what I'm trying to get at.
It's just recognition? Or more than that?
Well, we sort of discussed, I think, whether it's looking for justice, recognition, or something else.
Yeah, I have said this before, and I'm going to repeat it. A few years back, this was not possible at all. I mean, nobody dared to do anything like this. So there is improvement, and there is hope. So let's keep on doing whatever we can at our level. and just wait for the future and.
Oh, yes, Larry.
Because I lived in Newport, Rhode Island for 22 years, and there's a big military base there, naval base. And with a lot of Turkish officers that come, but it wasn't for their sake. I just personally felt that I had a responsibility every April to put an op-ed piece in the Newport Daily News about the Armenian genocide. And we only have a handful of Armenians in Newport, and we made sure the Armenian flag went up in the center of town on the 24th, the balloon ceremony. But one day, I happened to be in the Christmas tree shop there, and I thought I heard Turkish being spoken, so I leaned over and saw this handsome man in civilian clothing with his wife and a little girl holding onto a carriage with a baby in it. And I said, "Is that Turkish you're speaking?" And he says, "Yes, are you Turk?" And I says, "No, I'm Armenian." All of a sudden, all that cordial atmosphere vanished. And he looked at me, and the first thing that came out of his mouth was, as he put his finger up to my face, "No genocide." That's what he said to me. And my reflex was, yes, genocide. Before we knew it, there was a crowd around us. It was a very cordial discussion, but nevertheless, somewhat heated. And he was quite taken back that I knew the history of Atatürk and so forth, and Cemal Pasha. And he was somewhat shocked. And he told his wife in Turkish, "You go shop, I'm staying here and talking with this woman." So by now we have quite a crowd around us. But never raised voices, never anything. And he finally said, "Well, we can't talk about it." And I said, "But I can talk about it with you." And I said, "That's my responsibility to educate each Turkish person that I meet." And we ended up by him taking my hand and kissing it and saying, "Thank you. And you're an intelligent woman." I don't know that intelligence had anything to do with that. I spoke as an Armenian American. And he thanked me for my knowledge and for this dialogue, and we left. But I feel that I personally have a responsibility to share the information of what happened to my Armenian people. And I do that all the time that I have an opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Can I just end this with a question to everybody and to you? What is the responsibility of any Turkish person? If that's your responsibility, what is the responsibility of a Turkish person? The Turkish people in this room, do you have an answer?
Is me or the Turkish one?
No, there's a lady, but you can go because you haven't spoken.
I'm speechless because what I learned in school, and what I prefer to be as an evladı Osmanlı, Ottoman sons. I want to be Mevlana, Mimar Sinan, or other big personalities, grandchildren. And I don't want to be the grandchildren of the murderers, the ones who committed crimes. And maybe we didn't hear, or we didn't want to hear those things. But it's not vanishing. One day you see, and you see a woman and telling you the crimes of the history past. Personally, I'm not responsible, really. I didn't do anything. I had many good friends of all in Turkey, Armenian, Jewish, Greek or other, Kurdish or Alevi and others. And I have to be a good person to anybody. And I want my kids to grow up as good people and in peace, live in peace with all the people. And I don't want to cry because I feel your sorrow. I feel your sorrow, and I share your sorrow. my responsibility is, I have to see the whole picture, the good ones and the bad things happened in the past, and so the crimes my Turkish people, you told Asala killed some Turkish people and something happened, and this is, I don't want to compare one and the other. If something is bad and done to you, yes, it's bad, and I'm so sorry. And something is bad and done to me or is being done now, yes, it's bad, and everybody must stand against it. So, first of all, for example, Zadik, he's like, as my father's, a friend, because he's, tesbih, using tesbih. He's like Turkish man. He's my friend, yeah. And
we used to do that with that.
When I came here, I told you, I'm in the family. You are my family. I'm really saying this, that you are my family. That's it.
Thank you.
Bravo.
Thank you. Please.
My challenge as somebody who has grown up in Turkey is to come up with conversation prompts that create openings to the defensiveness that comes up with the word genocide, like that kind of response, and get people to acknowledge what they know but are afraid to say in public or afraid to admit to themselves. It's very hard to confess to a crime. And maybe I will be able to think about ways of framing the issues, multiple ways, that create openings. Already, I think there have been some openings, but the current government is so oppressive that this is not a top issue in Turkey. So it's an ongoing struggle. How to win hearts and minds, to get people to see and say, yes, yes, it happened. And we are the children of the people who let it happen and didn't want to talk about it.
Thank you. Thank you.
So maybe in this sense, Turkish people might act as allies, because sometimes people don't want to hear certain things when it comes from the others, but when it comes from more familiar people, it might be more conducive to having a dialogue. So in that sense, it's very important for Turkish people to talk about this. But I also want to say that in Turkey, there are also a lot of people who are already open to these dialogues, to just, this is not maybe an example of a dialogue, but recently a very famous Armenian doctor passed away, and it came as one of the first news. You know Agop Kotoyan? So, yes, he was also from my dermatologist too, so, and it was like, everyone was so sad, and I remember somebody broke into his house, again, it was on the news, it was like a bad thing that this very precious doctor, and like, he is a doctor, but when there was a breaking in sort of an event, it became news in Turkey, a very negative news in that sense. So I think there are lots of people that are quite open to having dialogues, and I guess as allies, maybe that's what we should be doing, like fostering dialogues. I guess solving the issue is quite difficult, but having dialogues is very important.
Last, I'm going to give you the last.
Okay, as a Turk, I also want to say something about this responsibility. And when you talk about this guilt, you said I don't feel I'm guilty. Sometimes I feel that I'm guilty. Because this issue is in the minds of many Turkish people in different intellectual capacity, they usually talk about the Armenian issue when two people or a group of people talk about politics. Sometimes the subject comes to Armenian issue, and it's not a forgotten thing in Turks' mind. So I feel guilty when such a talk happened, and I choose not to make any comment for not struggling with those people, not to try to change their minds or their prejudice. That's my feeling of guiltiness. Maybe we should do more about changing people's, other Turks' minds when they are talking about this issue. More or less educate.
Well,
Just a small
education is a...
correction. Excuse me. I didn't say I'm not guilty. I'm not responsible. I didn't do it. But yeah, I feel guilt.
I guess this may be a good way to end because, as Lerna mentioned, I did not just drop from the face of the earth and started to talk about this freely and in extreme comfort. So if you were to go, because it ties into Turkish people's responsibilities and how do Turkish people come to terms and start talking or questioning these things. So yes, I had done something about my own journey that took a long time. And I was like 48 years old or something when I started talking about the Armenian genocide. So that does happen. And if you were to go to that website and look around, there is more material, and you will see that, yes, there is a certain amount of self-awareness that Turkish people have to come to terms with about this. And my story is up there. But I didn't want to, I really do at this point of my life, want to have other people talk. And that is what I'm trying to achieve. Just one last thing, and you can say, Judy, just before I forget. What will happen is, if you're interested in what else comes, for what other clips come, what else I do on this documentary, and what other events, we're going to be having a registration process on the website so that if you want to be notified about what's up with this project, if you register, then you will be on a mailing list and you will get notifications for that. I just thought I'd mention that. Yes, Judy?
I wanted to thank you, Gonca, because I do think this is a really important project and it's encouraging a lot of the right kind of dialogue. And I also think we have a lot of role models out there. I remember reading a few months ago a Harvard professor who discovered that his ancestors had owned slaves. This is in the United States. Of course, that doesn't make you feel good when you realize your ancestors owned slaves and participated in slavery, but he was role modeling the kind of positive behavior, which is speak about it. Speak about how this is part of our legacy in this country. Problems of racism continue. That we all can play a role in doing something about the present harms, which all of you have been speaking about. This isn't just something from the past. And I think reading those stories and taking heart and realizing that, yeah, we will all feel guilty sometimes when we don't speak up when we know we should, not just about this, but all kinds of things. That there are ways that we can help each other, like don't get into situations when you're completely alone. If there's someone with you, you have a little more bravery. You know, there are ways in which we can start planning to be more effectively outspoken, but in ways that will engage people, not make them run away. And I see so many people doing this in other arenas, and I'm trying to learn from them. And I think we can do that too around this issue.
Any closing, anybody want to say
Yes.
anything that is only
Yes.
like a short thing?
Yes.
Anyway, yes?
What Armenians, what Turks should do, Armenians should expect 99% of Armenians. The other 0.1% somebody is not from this planet, even though they're Armenian. The first thing they expect from Turks is what this young man put beautifully. When this guy loses his father, what did I email you when you lost your father this past year? Gonca, my sympathies,
Yes.
my condolences, I share your pain. Acını paylaşıyorum. I share your pain. This young man just said it beautifully. I understand, I wasn't around, it's not my fault, but I learned, yes, there's some terrible things happen, and I
condemning those. I don't consider my ancestors. Onlar benim atalarım değil. Okay? All of the Turks have to do to Armenians, the one thing that's going to satisfy 99% of the Armenians to begin with. After that, everything else comes easy. The rest is all materialistic, whether it's money, land, this and that. But one thing the Armenian hearts will set at ease is, I share your pain. That's all they want to hear. Yes, I accept those terrible things happen. I share your pain, my Armenian friend. If the Turks said that, Armenians would, so you said the question, what should Turks do? That's their obligation. When they meet an Armenian on an individual basis, never mind multitude. I think this young man deserves my congratulations. He said it beautifully. I share your pain, and I don't consider those murders as my ancestors.
Thank you so much, and thank